his family. My amendment would correct this deficiency. I ask that my colleagues support the amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Withdraw.
The gentleman withdraws his objection. The gentleman from Florida is recognized to speak on the amendment.
I'm glad that the ranking member has ripened the question of bribes from China. I think it's one that I would like to explore with Hunter Biden if he were willing to properly acknowledge and honor the subpoena that he'd received from the United States Congress. And if there's any comparison on the Trump policies toward China and the Biden policies toward China, I am eager to engage in that comparison because President Trump put tariffs on China. He was tougher on China than any Republican or Democrat president in my lifetime for sure. And what I've learned about studying bribes is that when people pay them, they typically want something in return. And so when you've got these allegations about Trump in China, you're able to easily compare that to a record where Trump cracked down on China. Now let's compare that to the Biden record. After the Biden China bribes, you get the Biden administration dissolving the China initiative that President Trump and his administration set up at DOJ to specifically go after and prosecute Chinese efforts to engage in malign influence with academia, with politicians, with high society. And I know we have members of this committee intimately familiar with Chinese malign influence. And we would want a DOJ resilient and capable to be able to ensure that no one fell victim to that, from the United States Congress to even service on a city council. Now, Hunter Biden had this interesting email exchange on his laptop related to China that I can't wait to ask him about when a judge ultimately orders him here or to a jail cell. Why was Hunter Biden hosting the annual meeting for his investment fund at the home of the Chinese ambassador? Seems like an odd choice. There are a lot of great venues in Washington that could host the meeting for your annual investment fund, but when you choose to do it at the home of the Chinese ambassador, that seems to send a pretty clear message that it's hard to figure out where China ends and the Bidens begin. And I found it particularly interesting that while Hunter Biden was personally setting up this special and unique venue to convince people to invest in his fund based on his close ties with the Chinese, that all he had to do to secure the venue was agree to a private one-on-one meeting with the ambassador beforehand, which the emails indicate Hunter was readily willing to do. So aren't the rest of you curious to know what the ambassador wanted to meet with Hunter Biden about before Hunter Biden used his Chinese relationships to enrich himself, his family, his relatives, his uncle, his father, to pay the bills, to run the Biden crime family? I'd like to know what was going on at that meeting.
Would the gentleman yield?
Sure.
Let me just say, it may very well be that what Hunter Biden was doing was wholly improper. It may very well be that what Hunter Biden was doing was criminal. There is a special prosecutor. What there isn't is any evidence that President Biden had anything to do with any of this.
Well, I would suggest that the ambassador from China probably wasn't requesting a one-on-one meeting with Hunter Biden to go over investment tips and investment strategies. And if we had Hunter Biden in the witness chair, we could ask him. So it's one thing to say, well, there's just no evidence here. And then when we want to ask simple questions, like, was the ambassador asking about Hunter Biden's art interests and whether he preferred oil paintings or watercolors? I'm guessing that's not the case. And the reason Hunter Biden doesn't want to be in that witness chair is because when confronted with the documents and the evidence, they are boxed in. Because everybody in this country knows what was going on. Hunter Biden was the bag man. He was collecting the money, and Joe Biden was the inside man. And he was delivering the results for China and anyone else that was willing to pay him off. And that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. He seeks recognition. Question, gentleman from California.
I won't take the full 5 minutes, but I just want to sort of answer once and for all.
The lawmakers are actually coming out right now.
I have to say that there were a number of interesting moments, but perhaps none more interesting than when Hunter Biden told us that he joined the Burisma board to counter Russian aggression. I hadn't heard that one before. That thank goodness we had Hunter Biden on the Burisma board because that was central to his strategy to stand up to Vladimir Putin.
Has he taken the fifth at all?
No, he's been responsive to questions.
Has he told you exactly what value he brought to any of these wars and any of these companies yet? Have you guys asked him that?
Yeah, we've asked those questions, and there is an illusory value. It is a mirage to believe that Hunter Biden was engaged in international business. This was a bribe masquerading as an international business transaction. Nothing more, nothing less.
Do you still feel the impeachment inquiry is heading in a direction where you'll actually be able to vote on articles of impeachment?
Well, here we're asking questions about these corrupt business practices. I'm not really framing that through the lens of next steps. I'm just trying to get facts.
Biden wrote that he joined the board to support Russia in his book. Why don't Republicans do their research? Why haven't they read his book?
I have to say I thought it was a pretty strange statement. Either perhaps it jumps off the page when he says it in his own words.
Do you think, has he said anything that would specifically implicate the president? Have you seen evidence that the president was involved in those business dealings yet?
I believe that you can actually bribe someone by paying their family members. Like, I don't get this construct that unless Joe Biden himself received cash, that he somehow wasn't involved in the bribery operation. Joe Biden was doing the bidding of Burisma. He was doing the bidding of Chinese communists, and his family was getting enriched as a consequence. To me, that's a pretty strong case for bribery.
Sorry about that. I don't understand.
Put into the record, JustSecurity.org, the real Robert Hur report, has unanimous consent.
Without objection. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida for 5 minutes.
February 8th, the White House. Question, Mr. President, why did you share classified information with your ghostwriter? The President, I did not share classified information. I did not share it. I guarantee I did not. That's not true, is it, Mr. Hur?
That is inconsistent with the findings based on the evidence in my report.
Yeah, so it's a lie, is just what regular people would say, right? Yeah, all right. So the next one. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. That wasn't true either, was it?
That was inconsistent with the findings of our investigation.
Another lie, people might say, right? Because what you put in your report was among the places Mr. Biden's lawyers found classified documents in the garage was a damaged open box. So here's what I'm understanding, right? As Mr. Armstrong laid out, you find in your report that the elements of a federal criminal violation are met, but then you apply this senile cooperator theory, that because Joe Biden cooperated and the elevator doesn't go to the top floor, you don't think you get a conviction. And I actually think you get to the right answer in that. I don't think Biden should have been charged, don't think Trump should have been charged. But under the senile cooperator theory, isn't it frustrating that Biden continues to go out and lie about the basic facts of the report that lay out a federal criminal violation?
Congressman, I need to disagree with at least one thing that you said, which is that I found that all of the elements were met. One of the elements of the relevant mishandling statute is the intent element, and what my report reflects is my judgment that based on the evidence, I would not be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury that that intent element had been met.
Right, but the reason you have that doubt is the senile cooperator theory. The fact that Joe Biden is so inept in responding that you can't prove the intent, which again, I don't quibble with that conclusion, but it's frustrating to be like, oh, well, this guy's not getting treated the same way as Trump because the elevator's not going to the top floor, so we can't prove intent. While at the same time, Biden goes out there at the White House and says, well, you know, he just blatantly lies. And what I'm trying to figure out is whether or not Biden's lying because he's still so senile, he hasn't read your report, or whether it's a little craftier and a little more devious and perhaps a little more intentional than we might otherwise think. So I also want to go to this Biden Penn Center. Like, did it give concern to you that the Biden Penn Center, where all this classified stuff was being mishandled, was being floated by foreign governments?
Congressman, we were concerned with getting to the bottom of all of the classified documents that were recovered during the course of our...
Yeah, but what bothers me is that the money that was paying for the place where the documents were being inappropriately held, it was the Chinese and it was other foreign countries. Did that play into your analysis? Did you look into the $1 billion in foreign funding sources at the Biden Center at UPenn, for example?
Congressman, we conducted a thorough, impartial, and fair investigation, and we were very, very concerned with getting to the bottom of all the relevant questions relating to the recovered documents.
Did you look into the fact that the Chinese were floating the place where this guy was keeping the documents unsecure? Yes or no?
Congressman, to the extent that we identified evidence that was relevant and significant to our investigation, we put it in our report.
Okay, well, it seemed relevant to me, maybe not to you. Another thing that seemed relevant to me is this ghostwriter, right? So the ghostwriter purposefully deletes this evidence that seems to be like show culpability of Biden's crimes, and you don't charge him. Why did you not charge the ghostwriter with obstructing justice and deleting evidence?
Well, for a number of reasons that are laid out in the report, but in brief, Congressman, yes, when we interviewed the ghostwriter, he did tell us, and I'm trying to get the exact language, that one of the things on his mind, one of the things he was aware of, was that I had been appointed special counsel and was conducting an investigation.
Right, so he didn't, just so everybody knows, the ghostwriter didn't delete the recordings just as a matter of happenstance. Ghostwriter has recordings of Biden making admissions of crimes. He then learns that you've been appointed. He then deletes the information that is the evidence, and you don't charge him.
That is reflected in the report, and one of the reasons...
Like, what does somebody have to do to get charged with obstruction of justice by you? If like deleting the evidence of crimes doesn't count, what would meet the standard?
So, Congressman, as we state in the relevant chapter of the report, one of the things that Mr. Zwanitzer did not delete was transcripts of the recordings that he had created that included inculpatory evidence relating to Mr. Biden.
Oh, so if you destroy some evidence but not other evidence, that somehow absolves you of the evidence you destroy? Here's what I see. Zwanniger should have been charged, wasn't. Biden and Trump should have been treated equally. They weren't. And that is the double standard that I think a lot of Americans are concerned about. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hurth, thank you for being here. A little confused about this hearing. Mr. Raskin laid out the big picture.
So my time to Mr. Gaetz.
Hunter Biden's deposition. Question. Do you think some of your business associates we've spoken about today, Mr. Archer, Mr. Bobulinski, Mr. Galanis, do you think they had an expectation that your dad had any role or involvement in any of your joint business dealings? Answer from Hunter Biden. Not an expectation from me. There was never a single time I can remember saying, hey, we'll get my dad involved. Hey, let's get my dad on the phone. Hey, let's, what can we get out of dad for this? Mr. Galanis, what's your reaction to that testimony from Hunter Biden in light of you describing the Biden lift?
I think it's patently false. It's belied by emails, and I think that there's documentation that says that that's just an untruthful statement.
And what I'm trying to understand, Mr. Galanis, is there you are sitting in a prison cell for a financial crime where you were an associate with Hunter Biden and some of the other players there, and they're out enjoying Southern California, and you're sitting in a prison cell, and they've got the ability to come and give this false testimony to Congress. Is it your belief that the Biden Justice Department retaliates against people who speak out against the Bidens and their crimes?
I'm living that. I think to clarify, I took responsibility for my crimes. I pleaded guilty. I've served 8 years of clean conduct, and I think I've rehabilitated myself quite a bit in that period of time and evidence a track record. But I would say that there is unquestionably a pattern of 2 tiers of justice, and that's become a popularized term, and it's something that a lived experience that I've gone through.
Yield back.
Before I recognize Mr. Waltz, for what purpose does Mr. Biggs seek recognition?
I want to include an...
Without objection, so ordered. Now the chair recognizes Mr. Gaetz from Florida.
You're a serious business person, Mr. Bobulinski, right?
I am.
Unlike the convicted felon next to you, you've served in the military, right?
Correct.
You've done big deals.
Correct.
Complicated deals. Deals that involved foreign businesses, right?
Correct.
And so what I'm trying to figure out is when you came to realize that you showed up at the wrong party. Because you kind of strike me as a guy who showed up to do a legitimate business deal, and you ended up instead at a bribe. And so as you're looking at CEFC, as you're having this meeting with Joe Biden, as Hunter Biden is introducing you to his web of contacts, when did you go from serious businessman Tony Bobulinski working to make a buck in a capitalist system to a guy worried that you had been unwittingly ensnared into Hunter and Joe Biden's bribe operation with the Chinese Communist Party?
I appreciate the question. It wasn't an aha moment. It was more of a process. I am a serious businessman, demonstrated by the different deals I've done around the world and the success of them. But it started, remember, the Biden family wasn't my entry into this. James Gilliar, who I'd known for over 10 years, who traveled the world doing business, kept trying to get me involved. I really had no interest. I sat down in the spring of 2017 to walk through things, and then I quickly put together two businesses, Sinohawk and Oneida. After the meetings in Los Angeles with Hunter and Joe Biden, it started to sort of, bells and whistles started to go off when Jim Biden used the term plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability is the first moment, straight from the lips of Jim Biden, right on the heels of your discussion with Joe Biden, where you start to think, this might not be legit.
Correct. And my lawyers at the time could attest to that because I reached out to them saying, listen, I'm a former naval officer. I held a Q security clearance. I couldn't collect. Somebody couldn't take me to dinner for $50. This just does not make sense to me.
But you proceed, and then later this thing starts to get a lot uglier. What's the moment you go from, okay, your spidey senses are up, you're analyzing this, to now you know this is a crime that you are bearing witness to?
The end of July, when the Biden family put them right front and center in the middle of a $9 billion transaction between the Russian state-owned energy company Rosneft and CFC, a surrogate for the Chinese Communist Party.
And was there ever a time in the deals you were involved in where you started to see the money move around the legitimate business enterprise and toward the pockets of the Bidens?
Well, the challenge, Mr. Gaetz, with that is at the time they moved the money, right? You guys have the text messages where Hunter Biden shook down Director Zhang, but I was not aware of that. I spent a year asking questions of, this doesn't make sense to me, where's the money? I stepped in and had lawyers work to dissolve the two entities. I didn't know till years later that they had defrauded me, they had gotten paid all this money, and all this craziness. The amount of facts,
it just seems pretty simple. This is either a bribe or a business.
It was a bribe from the Chinese Communist Party.
And
I don't say that lightly. There's 1,200 pages, 8 days of testimony in the Southern District of New York. I encourage everyone watching me, hearing me say this. They're publicly available. Go read them. Our Department of Justice outlines in intimate detail the corruption and bribes that CFC was deploying to political officials all over the world.
It wasn't
so
just in
I'm
the
here
United
to
States.
believe that they did this in every other country, but with the Biden family, it was pristine. It was an actual clean business. That's absurd.
And you came to know that, and that's when you blew the whistle, right? That's when you started to get worried, when you saw Joe Biden.
I stepped away from it. There's the whistleblowers. I can't give them kudos enough for the bravery and the risk they put their family in. They publish stuff where I am voicing the concern of the Rosneft deal.
And you animated your concerns when you saw that this wasn't just a corrupt bribe, a corrupt business deal happening to a guy who used to be vice president. When you see that everyone's made a big deal like you're a bad guy that you showed up at the debate, or you're trying to give life to these facts that you've observed, that it's so bad that you did that during a political contest. But observing this, it kind of seems like it would be unpatriotic for you to stay quiet.
Of course.
And so, I mean, Joe Biden running for president clearly motivated the Chinese to consummate this bribe. Did it also motivate you?
Well, I didn't want to go public. I wanted to simply unload all the facts, personal experiences. It's funny, there's 18 people on this committee with law degrees, including, I think, Mr. Swalwell. Evidence, firsthand testimony, is the most powerful evidence you have. I've given it, Mr. Galanis has given it, along with a whole host of other witnesses. Then, on top of that, I have thousands of documents and pages of legals and stuff like that.
That's what's
I
interesting,
wanted to
Mr.
simply
Bobulinski.
give this information.
Yeah,
Congressmen and senators.
No
and
one
let them
questioned
do their
any of
job.
your facts. Yeah. No one brought a single piece of evidence that even for a moment discredited any of the truthful testimony that you've given us.
No,
I see my time's expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. That concludes our questioning. again, want to thank the witnesses. We are going to close now, and I will yield to the ranking member
For 5 minutes.
Mr. Flaherty, as you were putting the heat on social media companies, did you make the decisions which posts were most egregious to highlight or flag, or were there other people telling you which posts to go and express concern about?
Congressman, I'll say in general, we were lifting up examples of content that we felt were violating.
When you say we, I just want to know which human beings were involved in deciding, like, this Leonardo DiCaprio meme had to go.
In general, we were discussing specific pieces of content when we were discussing.
Again, I know you guys love pronouns, but we is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the names of the people.
Congressman, I'm not authorized to.
Well, you wrote an email on April 21st, 2021. We remain concerned that YouTube is funneling people into vaccine hesitancy. This concern is shared at the highest, and I mean highest, levels of the White House. So we'd like to continue a good faith dialogue here. I'm on the hook for reporting out. Who were you on the hook for reporting out to?
Congressman, I can't recall who specifically I was referencing in that document.
Because you kind of just strike me as a functionary. I don't really think you were making these decisions. I think that these people that you say the highest levels of the White, when you say the highest, and I mean the highest levels of the White House, who are you referring to? Without using the word we.
Congressman, I can't recall specifically who I'm representing.
Well, when you say are you talking about President Biden?
Congressman, I don't think it should be a surprise that the administration was focused on the issue of presenting authoritative information
by the way,
about the
I
vaccine.
find your testimony terrifying, but incredibly intellectually honest. Because you've come here and you've taken the position, look, you know, in the White House, people are always trying to shape how information is received. They do it with the New York Times, you've seen it on the West Wing, and I think a lot of Americans see a distinction between powerful White House officials trying to shape a news story in the Washington Post and then trying to shape what all of America and the world can see in the digital information space. But you say there's no distinction there, and I think that's honest. It scares the hell out of me, but that seems to be your testimony, right?
Congressman, these platforms are making hundreds of millions of algorithmic editorial decisions a second. And those algorithmic decisions...
I get it. I just don't want the White House participating in them. I get that to have social media companies, there are all these decisions that get made about what content rises and falls. What we have a problem with is when the United States government is putting their thumb on the scale. Now, you said there were no threats and there were no consequences. Was there pressure? Did you put pressure on social media companies?
Congressman, we certainly raised areas where we had questions about their policies or concerns about their enforcement.
Would you categorize that as pressure, yes or no?
Congressman, I can't speak to how they interpreted my conversations.
Well, I can because there's an email about it. Nick Clegg sends an email. The title is Andy Slavitt Podcast. And he asks people at Facebook, can someone quickly remind me why we are removing, rather than demoting or labeling, claims that COVID is man-made before May? And the reply to that email is, and I quote, because we were under pressure from the administration. We shouldn't have done it. So were you part of that pressure campaign?
Congressman, again, having not seen the document, I can't speak to who they're referencing or what they're referencing. All I can say is...
Well, Mr. Slavitt, were you a part of that pressure campaign?
I don't believe we were applying any undue pressure on social media companies. I don't think they interpreted it that way.
Well, in writing they have. Mr. Chairman, I seek to enter into the record the email where the people at Facebook are saying, okay, well... Objection. Fine, it exists. It's part, it's out there. And Mr. Slavitt, there's another email, which I'm sure the Democrats would object to having considered, where a Facebook employee says, Jutz got off an hour-long call with Andy Slavitt. He was outraged. Not too strong a word to describe his reaction that we did not remove this post, which was the third most highly ranked in the data we sent him. That was a Leonardo DiCaprio meme. That was a joke. Were you guys trying to get jokes removed?
Mr. Congressman, thanks for asking. I'll try to explain, but really briefly. If Facebook, by their own policy, had put something on their website which said 250,000 people are dying every year from the vaccine, that would undoubtedly have violated their policy.
Okay, well, let's go to true information. Hold on, let's go to true information then. Because in another Facebook document, they say, quote, the Surgeon General wants us to remove true information about side effects. Mr. Flaherty, should true information be removed?
Congressman, I can't speak to what they're.
Can't even speak to whether or not we should censor the truth because they don't like where it leads. I see I'm out of time. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yields back. The gentlelady from California is recognized. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it has not escaped my notice that